God damn, you got some old people there.
Joe
Joe
Diesel.
Riggs? I love that dude.
How you doing, man?
What's up, stud? How you doing?
Just getting by. How you doing?
I miss you.
I miss you, buddy. How you doing?
I'm doing really good.
That's good to hear, man.
John, thanks for making time, brother. I was pumped to have you on.
Dude, I told you, man, anything you need, I got to give you I told you, I got to give you my number. I screwed up. I didn't give it to you.
Heck yeah. Give you a jingle so I quit making a fool of myself in the corner.
Nice.
Hey, I'm telling you, you gotta follow all of these people that are online because they all know so much.
Yes.
And listen to everything that they tell you because it's all true.
Yep.
Bastards.
Oh, love them.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're back again. Beautiful day out. And thankful to be alive. If you got 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 eyes, 2 ears, you got a lot to be thankful for. So let's get that posture up. Grab ourselves a refreshment.
Sip.
And let's get serious. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. So simple. Go to the App Store. Download PrizePicks. Pick more or less on your favorite players in the NBA, NHL, UFC for the chance to win 100 times your money. Available in states like Texas, California, and 30 more, plus Canada. And if you're a new user, place a $5 lineup. Get $50 instantly, no strings attached when you use code TIMBO at sign up. That's place $5 lineup, get $50 instantly when you use code TIMBO. We got UFC 307 coming up this weekend, so be on the lookout. I'm going to do final picks on YouTube, Instagram, and Snapchat stories, so be on the lookout. Thank you very much, PrizePicks. So today, we got the legend Joe Diesel Riggs in the house, as usual, and then we also got the legendary Big Jon MCCARTHY, who's one of the most... I would say famous referees that there's ever been. He refereed back at UFC 2. Do you still have some good memories of that, John? I'm
recognizable because I'm one of the ugliest referees I've ever been, so that's really what it is. No, dude, it's funny. I have a memory when it comes to things that I took part of. I can remember everything. I can tell you every fight there was on that.
That's crazy.
It's just, it's just blazed into my brain. So
how did it?
I remember it all.
How did it come about? UFC 2. Who contacted you and said, "Hey, you want to ref this like MMA fight?" And were you not sure what it was at that point?
No, I knew exactly what. I was at UFC 1.
Mm-hmm.
I was there. I was actually a sparring partner for Hoist Gracie. I had started with the Gracies back in 1992. I had met Horian. He was up at the LA Police Academy. I had met him. He invited me to come work out with him, and I said, yeah, absolutely, I'd love to, right? And well, when? And I said, well, whenever. He goes, today. Nice. So I ended up going that day, and the first person I rolled with was Hoist, and I fell in love with what they did. I loved the way that they would not make excuses about things, because a lot of martial arts places that I've been to, we could do this, but someone, you could get hurt, this kills you, this, and all this crap. And it's like, no. And they were the first ones that, yeah, let's try it. Let's do it. And it was a blast. And so I got the job, I guess, of being the referee in the UFC at UFC 2, based upon the very first fight that took place in the UFC. Gerard Gordeau fought Taylor Tooley. And if you remember, Taylor Tooley was from Hawaii. His real name was Taylor Wiley, and he was a big sumo wrestler. And Gerard Gordeau was that
was a great.
They called him Savat. He was a maniac from Holland, which a lot of them are. But he's a very good kickboxer, and he ended up kicking Taylor's teeth. One went in his foot, one went flying out of the cage, and then he hits him with the right hand. And the guy they brought in 2 referees from Brazil. One was João Barreto, that was the referee for this fight, and the other was a guy named Elio Vigio. And João Barreto, sees that Taylor can't fight, and he stops it, but he wasn't allowed to. Back then, UFC 1, the referee had no ability to stop the fight. Supposedly, it was the fighter would either tap out or the corner had to throw in the towel. Well, he came in because obviously Taylor's getting whooped and he's not doing anything to defend himself. He's hurt. He stops it, and you'll see, if you go back and look at it, you'll see Horian Gracie, up at the cage and he's arguing with João Barreto, and João Barreto is saying, hey, this guy can't fight. I got to stop this, and Horian's saying, you're not supposed to stop it. And it was that fight that got me my job because Horian called me over and said, I need you to referee.
And was there any
That's crazy.
was there any negotiating for pay, or did he say, I'm just going to pay you this and that's what it's going to be?
No, there was nothing as far as pay or anything like that. When he asked me to do it, I didn't even, it was, first I was, a student of theirs. So it was like, you need me to do something, I'll do it.
Mm-hmm.
Because look, he was, taking care of me. So it was like, I didn't even think about the conflicts or anything of that. And it was like, okay, and the first thing I was thinking about is, shit, I got to learn how to referee because I have no fucking clue what I'm doing. I don't, and I had a friend who, he says, what are you going to do in there? And I go, I'm going to fucking stand there and look, and I'm going to move to that spot over there. And then I'm going to move to that spot over there. I said, because I'm going to have to look like I'm doing something, because what am I going to do? I can't stop the fight. It's a matter of when someone taps out or someone throws in the towel, that's when I can stop it. So they were actually thinking back then of putting me in a chair above the octagon.
Like a lifeguard.
Yes,
That's
what I called it. I called it the lifeguard chair. And I said, you're going to put a fucking umbrella above it too? Just being and they were going to give me this red towel. And if I wanted the fight to stop, I was supposed to throw the red towel because someone tapped at the corner, threw in the towel. And I was like, and you think they're going to stop? Okay. Right. And then, it's probably not a good idea. No, it's probably not.
So when they started putting in rules one by one, were you a part of kind of what rules they should put in, or who came up with those?
I did.
Nice.
That was all me, and I'm to blame. It's my fault. You can blame me now.
And after, who was it? Joe Son when he was getting punched in the nuts? Were you thinking about keeping nut shots in there, or were those out the window?
It's funny because at UFC 1 there was 3 rules, and the rules were no biting, no eye gouging, and no groin shots. And there were specific people that fought in UFC 1 that said, well, if I could have done this, if I could have had, knees to the groin or kicks to the groin like I normally do in my style. And so UFC 2, the one that I started in, they said, okay, groin shots are allowed. So the 2 basic rules were no biting and no eye gouging. That is what you could not do. Other than that, everything was legal. So I didn't have a whole lot of rules to remember, which it was good because I wasn't that bright. So, but when they started putting in rules, it was after UFC 2. I'll be honest with you. When I can tell you, like I said, Sean Dougherty was in the very first fight against Scott Morris in UFC 2. That's the first fight I ever refereed. And he was a young 18-year-old kid who did Taekwondo, and Scott Morris was from Robert Busey's Warriors International and a ninja.
Oh shit!
He did ninjutsu.
So did Horn though.
But he quickly, he grabs hold and he gets him, in a guillotine, flips him over, and he taps out in like 20 some seconds. And I was like, all right, that was easy. And then Pat Smith is the next one. He goes against a guy named Ray Wizard, who I knew. And Ray is a very good, accomplished, karate guy, very fast in point, fighting with karate and stuff, but he can't fight with someone like Pat Smith. And he quit. But he gets choked. And I was like, shit, this is going to be easy. And from that point, my life became a living hell. And after I did UFC 2, they were all ecstatic. The people who owned it, which was Art Davey, Horion, and Bob Meyerowitz. And I told him, I said, yeah, I'm never doing that again.
Damn.
And they go, why? It was great. And I go, look.
Joe's son got his nuts beat off.
He took it like a
No,
champ.
that was UFC 4.
Oh, okay.
But I said, look, I said, I know you guys are, wanting to see what techniques and everything work. I go, but there's things happening in there that are the same as what I see in the streets of LA.
Oh,
I said, and when you're talking about someone stomping on someone's head and I can't stop it because I have a fighter that's unconscious, so they can't tap out, and I got a corner that's too fucking stupid to throw in a towel. You want me to stand there and watch someone get stomped to death? I can't do that. And they go, oh, no, we don't want that. And I said, look, I have to have the ability to stop the fight. This is when I came up with it. I said, if a fighter cannot intelligently defend themselves, I need to be able to stop the fight.
Damn.
All right, let us think about it. And I said, all right, think about it. And they got back to me, about 3 days later, and they said, okay, if a fighter cannot intelligently defend himself, you can stop the fight. But they have to be where they can't intelligently defend themselves. I said, okay. And that's where I ended up going to UFC 3. And at UFC 4, you had Keith Hackney pounding on the nuts of Joe Sonnen. And you know, it did not look good. It couldn't have happened to a better guy.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you know the whole story behind that one, but couldn't have happened to a better guy.
Is there anything in this day and age, if you could go back and like change a rule right now, what would you change? Is there anything?
If I was going to put something in place that was from back then, is I would actually, you know, the rule of a grounded fighter is going to be changing here in 1 month. It's November 1st. It changes to, you can no longer play the put the one hand down and you're a grounded fighter. It's going to be, you have to either, you know, be on a knee, it's basically the same as like an NFL running back. You know, you think about it, an NFL running back is carrying the ball, he puts one hand down and he's still churning his legs, he's up. You know, if his forearm hits the ground, he's down. And that's the way the whole rule basically looks. So it's going to change things. It's going to change when people can be hit. Yeah. And it's important. But if I was going to have my way, I truthfully would make it to where you could knee the head of a grounded fighter. Not that you could soccer kick the head of a grounded fighter, but in a down position, you could knee somebody.
In a front headlock.
In a front headlock, you could knee someone. If someone wants to stay on the ground there, hey, that's your choice. Or move. And, you know, you can go back and see fights no matter where, you know, present day or even in the past, where when that rule was allowed, or, you know, in present day where it's allowed, you see fighters don't put themselves in the position for those things to happen to them very, very often. Obviously, they can get hurt and it can happen, and they can get knocked out, but it's a dangerous sport. And to sit there and to allow fighters to use rules to protect themselves in certain situations doesn't usually benefit the sport.
What about up kicks? Say a guy's on top of you in the full guard on his knees. What about up kicks from the bottom?
You can't. See, you would be able to do that if that rule changed the way that I'm saying. That would make it a legal technique. What you couldn't do is be up, have someone down on the ground, and soccer kick them in the head.
Yeah. And then,
but other than that, I would like knees to the head of a grounded fighter, and even up kicks, you know, to someone who's a grounded fighter. An up kick to a grounded fighter, meaning that they want to stay on their knees. Okay, you can actually hit them to the head.
And John and Josh Thompson, also another legend of the sport, they have their own podcast. It's called the Weighing In Podcast, if you guys want to check that out. And we briefly touched on it, but you are the first person to actually explain to me that you cannot talk to the other corner. You can't say their name. And even on Twitter before the fight and stuff, I saw someone ask Jason Herzog, is that legal? And he said, all is fair in love and war. So I was like, well,
he said that.
It looks like, I might be good. And then Herb Dean did talk to me before. And then at the beginning of the fight, I said, Merab, you need to be patient. And that's when he freaked out. And then John explained it the best anyone explained it to me, that it is not allowed.
Right? Yeah, it all came, you know, about based upon fights in the past. And we would end up having corners that started saying things to their opponent, their fighter's opponent, trying to draw their attention, to say things that made the person kind of react. And we said, all right, you cannot have a corner who is actively participating in trying to gain the attention or tell the opponent what to do in a given scenario. So we made it to where, and this was part of the unified rules, is a corner man can talk to their fighter throughout the fight. Obviously, they have to be saying something that is, you know, appropriate to a point, but they cannot talk to their fighter, you know, to the other fighter through their fighter, you know, by saying stuff to them in relation to the fighter. So you, as the corner, you don't want to be able to, you know, do signals that would contain the name of the opponent. Anything like that wouldn't be a smart idea, because now you're actually saying that you could possibly be drawing the attention of that opponent. So you're allowed to talk to your fighter. You are not in any fashion allowed to communicate with the opponent.
So if we have someone in the front row that's not in the corner, then we might be okay.
you might be okay.
What if, John? What if they're exhausted? Like if you're cornering and you see your fighter's opponent's exhausted, and you say, "Go," they're tired. You push it. You can do that or no? Can you
Yeah,
acknowledge?
absolutely.
It? Okay.
You're not calling out their name to try to get their attention. You're talking to your fighter. You're talking to saying, "Hey, he's exhausted. Go after him. Go." That's all good. That's you being a coach. That's you being a trainer.
Yeah, it's good to know, and thanks for explaining that for me.
Oh, hey.
What is the baddest you've ever felt stopping a fight where you're just like beating yourself up, like, fuck, I should have let that go a little longer? Is there a time that sticks out?
Man, there's time. I can tell you times that I screwed up, and there's many times that people will sit there and say, "Oh, you screwed up here," and it's like, nope, I did not. But it's a matter of, if I said which one would I wish I went longer. One of the ones that comes up, I have ones that are like spaced. The first one that I truly really screwed up on was Sakuraba versus Conan Silveira, and it was in Japan, and there was so much going on, but I was told, Sakuraba was a late replacement, and the matchmaker and the owners of the UFC at the time were told, look, this is a pro wrestler. They went and they looked, and he had one pro fight against Kimo Leopoldo, and he lost badly. But some people say that was a work. I'm not saying it was or not, but they told me, hey, this guy doesn't belong in here. As soon as you can get him out, get him out. And I said, oh, all right. And so that was my mistake, because I listened to them. He got hit with a shot, and then he kind of dropped, and he's looking for a low single, but I stopped it, and I was wrong. So I screwed that up. I screwed up when Matt Lindland false tapped against Murillo Bustamante and then said I didn't tap. So that was another big one for me. But if you're going to sit there and say, which one did I stop early? I didn't stop a whole lot that were that early. Mm-hmm. Some I could have stopped maybe sooner. Yeah. There was ones that I look at, and it's.
Which one?
But,
what was the worst one with that one?
Oh my God!
What about the Gary Goodridge elbows?
All right, now that's Paul Pereira.
That's it.
And if you go to that one, perfect mistake. That was a mistake I made before Sakuraba, and that was the mistake of I knew Gary. I used to arm wrestle in competition.
No
Gary
shit.
was a world champion. Yeah. And, I talked to Gary before the whole show took place, and I go, what the hell are you doing? It just didn't make sense to me. And he goes, he had never been in a fight. I mean, even a street fight. Right. And he says, man, my friends and I were watching this, and he was like, yeah, I'll do it. And I was like, oh my God, Gary, it was like, and then I knew Paul. And I knew Paul was a wrestler from he went to Nebraska. He was a good wrestler. He was a tenacious grinder. And I was like, man, if Paul shoots on him, Gary is in trouble. And as soon as Paul shot, I was of the mindset, well, he's going to get on top of him and he's going to slowly work it. And Gary had worked out with his team. They knew that Paul liked to do a high crotch. And so they worked out this maneuver, and it worked for him. And man, I was slow. I was definitely slow on that. I mean, you can it goes fast, but I was still slow.
Do you ever get caught up in watching the fight?
No,
never do.
Yeah, that's a mistake. That's a mistake that'll get you into that situation. If you can never watch the fight like you're a fan. You are watching for specific things to be taking place, and you're always looking for who is the person I need to put my attention to, because you'll end up, as a referee, you end up watching one person about, if it's a close fight, you end up watching them about 70-30. If it's a bad fight, you're watching them 95-5.
I bet watching that fight, a lot of wrestlers, because one of the main shots in wrestling is a high crotch. But if you sit there on that high crotch, they're going to take your back, crucifix you, and usually be okay to fat man's roll someone, but you're stuck in that crucifix getting elbowed to death. So I bet that changed the mind of a lot of wrestlers after watching that fight.
God,
I'll tell you what. Yeah, that one right away, you looked at it and you go, because Paul probably went out on the second elbow. I want to say, and he took about 8 of them.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. And that's how fast, the sport was. And it was like, again, at the time, let's be honest, if I'm going to think about it, I would say that was probably somewhere I had about 40 fights that I had refereed. I was an amateur.
Yeah. So
go back and I watch those old fights. I can't stand them. I can't stand anything that I did. And the rules change from fight to fight to fight. And I always get people that'll sit there and they'll watch a fight from the past and they'll put today's rules with it, saying you allowed him to do this and you allowed him to do that. And it's like, yeah, I did. That was the rules.
Yeah. So were you around when they started to discuss rounds and okay, maybe it's gonna be a 5-minute round with a 1-minute break or
yeah.
So a group of you guys were sitting in.
It wasn't a group of us.
It was you.
He did everything.
Damn.
It was not a group of us. It was, I had at the time, I used Jeff Blatnick a lot for ideas as far as, hey, what do you think? When I would bounce ideas off of him. And Art Davey, up until UFC Japan, was considered the commissioner. First it was, it was Art, and then it ended up being a guy named Ron Van Cleef. But I would talk to Jeff, and if something came up, and then I would end up calling Bob Meyerowitz, who owned the UFC at the time. But it was like, Tank Abbott fought Oleg Taktarov, and during it, he's trying to stick his fingers in his mouth to try to pull his lips, and I can't do anything about it.
Fish hooking.
Yeah, and I'm like, that's ridiculous because Oleg should bite him, but you can't bite. So because the real defense to it is, I'm going to bite down on your finger.
Yeah.
So I go after the fight. That was at UFC 6. I go to Bob and I said, hey, we cannot allow fish hooking. And I called it that because I had watched my father. I was at Dodger Stadium with my dad for a baseball game, and a giant brawl broke out. And my dad had a lot of his friends there, and they became a big part of it. And there was a guy with a box cutter that was cutting people.
Oh, shit.
And my dad ended up grabbing a hold of him, and I remember he picking him up in the air, and he had him by the mouth, and he went like this, and it split him from his lip all the way up towards his eye, because he had a mustache, and his mustache started flapping. And afterwards, I was like, I'm looking at my dad. I'm a little kid. I had my little Dodger bat, man.
Jeez.
And I go, what was that? And he goes, what? I said, when you went like this, and he goes, that's fish hooking. Never do that. Right? And so I was like, okay, so that's fishing. You don't do that. And honestly, when he did it, I said, holy shit, that's fish hooking. So that was, a rule that came in. Then, you go to UFC 7, which is the next show. There's a guy named Geza Kallman, who is a professional wrestler who works out with Dan Severn at the time. And Dan was a big part of the show. So Dan gets him in the show. He's fighting this guy named Joel Sutton. Joel Sutton, headbutts him, which is allowed at the time. And with the headbutt, he opens him up about a half an inch on his forehead. But then he takes his fingers and he sticks his fingers in it, and he pulls and he rips him both ways, And so it was like, oh man, you shouldn't be able to do that. So to this day, if you look in the rules, no sticking your fingers in an opponent's, any orifice or opening cuts. So that goes all the way back to UFC 7. And that's how these things started.
You take someone's back, flatten them out, and you get double fish hooks.
Well, I got my butthole violated by Phil Baroni before.
Really?
Yeah.
Was it at the after party?
Did he check the oil?
Yeah, not just check the oil. He just hammered it home. Because I was in John, you ref the fight. You ref the fight.
Was I?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh shit.
And but there was it was like my ass was kind of pointing to the fence, but I was squealing. I was in tight a double, and he started freaking violating me. So I pulled guard to get out of that thing. Yeah,
I apologize, bro.
No. I squealed. Yeah, it was. It happens a lot. I've done it myself. It's all right.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Man, there needs to be a documentary out about how all these rules came about, how the rounds came about, and how did you decide? Because Pride was going on at the time, I think, and they were doing 10-minute rounds with a 2-minute break, right?
Yeah, they had a 10-minute round, 2-minute break, 5-minute round, and then if it was a championship, another 5-minute round.
And then
at the time that we started doing, we did rounds differently in the beginning. Is we had a 15-minute round.
Really?
It was a 1-minute, 15-minute round, and then if it was no conclusion to the fight, there was a 3-minute overtime, and if it was a championship fight, there was another 3-minute overtime.
Jeez.
So, yeah, these are all the things that occurred throughout time. It's funny because you'll get fighters that'll, and Mark Coleman went on a podcast, and I love Mark, and he was talking about the UFC, didn't want him, and I'm like, Mark. I'm thinking to myself, Mark, you're crazy. They loved you. They wanted you. They wanted you to do well. He's like, that. They didn't like wrestlers and stuff. But he talked about a fight, that I did that was him against Pete Williams.
Oh, maybe that.
And he ended up getting knocked out in it.
Kick the lips.
And it was a kick straight across the face with a shoe.
Yeah.
Because you were allowed to do that at that moment. You were allowed to kick with shoes and kick to the face. Then they took that away. I mean, everything changed.
Mm-hmm.
But he in that fight there was there was a moment back at Ultimate, the first Ultimate, which was supposedly the biggest event they had. It was after UFC 7, and they took all their best fighters, and that's when judges came in. And they took all the best fighters they had, Dan Severn and Marco Huas, who had just won UFC 7, took Keith Hackney, Steve Jenham, who had won UFC 3, and took all the best fighters they could. Yeah.
He was an alternate, right? Steve Jenham? He won
at
as an
UFC 3 he was, yeah. And then he won.
Nice.
Yeah. But they took, that, and I told them at the time, I said, hey, you start putting, fighters against better competition. Right now we don't have, judges. I said, you're going to end up with ties. I said, and so now you're going to then say that who's going to pick the winner, or you're going to go straight to your alternate. Both of them are out, and now you're going to bring the alternate in to take their place. You're going to have to, we're going to have to figure this out. So that's when we came up with, okay, we're going to have judges. So at the Ultimate. That was also, when something occurred, and it was Oleg Taktarov against Marco Huas, where Marco Huas finally takes Oleg down, and Oleg reaches up and he grabs the cage, and with one hand he pulls himself to a standing position. And I went to them and I said, look, I'm just telling you, you shouldn't be able to use the cage to benefit you and to be a tool during the fight. You have to use your skill. And the guy who owned it, Bob Meyerowitz, he looked at me and he goes, you're crazy. I love that moment. That was the greatest thing ever. We're leaving that. And so we had all of these fights that start to take place. There's a lot of fence grabbing, and you can watch guys getting, their legs are out horizontal to the floor and they're holding on and they're not going anywhere. And then there was a fight at UFC 11 between Jerry Bolander and a phenomenal jiu-jitsu practitioner named Fabio Gurgel. And Jerry ends up taking Fabio down, and Fabio is doing all of these beautiful sweep attempts, but Jerry keeps on grabbing the cage to, keep himself in place. And by the end of the fight, the octagon, the cage is just, the cage wire is just torn apart. That's how much he's pulled on it and stuff. And it wasn't that good of a fight. And so the owner comes to me, he says, hey, I was thinking about that fence grabbing after that fight. He goes, we got to do something about someone holding on to the cage to keep their opponent, where they want. You can't do that.
And I bet,
so you want to put in a rule in where it says they can hold on to the cage to keep themselves up, but they can't hold on to the cage to keep their opponent where they're at. Yes.
So I bet.
So that was the rules.
I bet all these fighters, there's not internet, really good internet at the time, any internet. So they come to the fighters meeting. They had this whole training camp planning on using the fence and stuff, and then they get there and they say, this rule's changed, this rule's changed.
You're just
like, fuck.
You're talking, Joe was just talking about Randy Couture just before we started, and I go, Randy was the first one to say, John, what the fuck? I've been training for this, and now you guys are changing the rules. And I go, I'm sorry, dude. What do you want? And he says, I want you to tell me what the goddamn rules are before I come to the show for the fight. And I go, that makes sense. And so, yeah, you're right. It was a problem because they wouldn't actually know what the rule set was for that night because it was changing all the time until we did the fighters meeting. Man. And at the fighters meeting, they could yell at me all they wanted about, I don't like that rule. I don't care. Yeah. It is what it is.
Fuck you.
And some of most of them were, changes that I would put in, and a lot of them were like the fence thing where that's the owner. He wants that. What do you want me to do? I can't do anything about it.
And then all the jiu-jitsu guys, I bet, were pumped up when they took out headbutts.
Yeah.
That was, at that point, the UFC was getting taken off of cable, and that's a whole story that goes unto itself. But you had John McCain from Arizona. Thank you. I think the same thing. Yeah, but and my problem with McCain is he's a politician, so he's a liar. It's just, that's something they all do. Yes. And, he sits there and he acts about, why boxing is so good, but this is human cockfighting. He didn't talk about that his family was, distributors for all kinds of beer products and everything. And the Budweiser was part of those, and that the UFC at the time in pay-per-view was taking money away from the boxing fights. And so I have to do something to help the boxing community because I get represented by Budweiser, and so it's like, it's all of it. They're all dirty. And so, you look and you go, we went and we had a meeting with Time Warner was the biggest cable provider at the time. And there was a guy named Leo Hendry. He's still around. He was in charge of it. He was, the guy named Tom Malone was the owner of it, but Leo Hendry was his president. And so we actually, I flew to Colorado to meet up with him, and Bob Meyerowitz and myself and Art Davey went there, and I presented a whole new rule set for the sport, because he was one of the ones that, that basically he was taking it off of everything. He's saying, you can't call it a sport when I see someone getting punched in the nuts. Joe-san, all the way back to the one you were talking about.
Taking it like a champ.
And so I was able to say, well, that is now, it's against the rules. And the other thing that I had to, put against the rules was headbutts. And I knew when I was putting this together, because this was right in between UFC 14 and the UFC Japan and UFC 15 coming up. Mark Coleman was, considered this now the ground and pound expert. And look, you grabbed a hold of Mark, you grabbed his arms, and he had a big melon, man, and it was strong, and he had a big neck, and he could wield a lot of, damage with that head. And I knew, back then, Mark Coleman's going to hate my fucking guts for doing this, but had to do it to try to save the sport at the time. And so, that was, I introduced 18 rules in that. And that's what the UFC went with at that time, trying to get back on cable.
Man, that's so crazy. Was there any other rounds that you were thinking about? Because you came up with the 5-minute rounds, minute break. Was there any other that were on the table? Were you thinking about going 3-minute rounds? Were you thinking about going, what were you thinking there?
We talked about, everything that we talked about 3-minute rounds. We talked about 2-minute rounds. We talked about all these different things, and, hey, we'll do 2-minute rounds and do 10 up to 10 for a championship fight, because really you're talking about 20 minutes of fighting. It's even less than what is done now with a 5, but it would give, hopefully bring the action. And we talked about 2, 3s, but 3 was boxing. And so that went away real fast, and, kind of went into all right, we've got to give someone an opportunity. If they are a grappler and they have grappling, it's starting on the feet. That's an advantage for the striker. We've got to give some time for the grappler. If they do get the fight to the ground, you can't just expect the submission to happen. It takes time to progress, position your body and progress that. So what about 5? And then as we were doing it, John Peretti had tried to do it with Extreme Fighting Battlecade. So there was something to watch there, because he had Kevin Jackson in it at the time. And I watched it and I said, 5 minutes works, and then we went back, and that was what we decided on. We'll go with the 5 minutes, and it's kind of stuck. Man,
that's crazy. How many different champions would there be if there was still one 15-minute round?
Shit.
Who knows?
Be a little different, wouldn't it?
It would be different. And did you guys ever think about implementing the yellow cards? Because in Pride fighting, they would issue the yellow cards, and it would be a small percentage takes out of the purse, right? If you got a yellow card for stalling.
Yeah, I was one of the big proponents that hated that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because first off, I'm not ever giving a fighter a yellow card, because I'm never taking money from them. I'm not going to be the guy that's taking money out of someone's, hands. They got families to feed and everything. It's like, oh, no. I look at the yellow card it's a show, and it's part of a show. When you're sitting there, there's ways of doing things without the yellow card that are the exact same. When I give someone a warning, that's what the yellow card was, except no money. If I take points, that affects the fight even more than the yellow card. And so you take a look and you go, I understand why, people like the yellow card, thinking, oh, it looks really good when they're putting that stupid card in front of the fighter's face saying, I don't like what you're doing. but I never wanted to be the person that was ever taking money from a fighter, and I would never have done. I can tell you, I've done hundreds of fights with the yellow cards and red cards in my pocket.
Never
No,
used them.
they don't come out. Dang. The only time they came out is if it had no effect on their pay.
Oh man, that's pretty cool. And is there any fight that sticks out to you that you were just maybe most nervous for or most fired up for?
Man, you know, it's funny. Nervous was the very first fight I ever did.
I bet.
I mean, if you're going to say you want a nerves, and I try to tell people all the time, it's like you'll get, you know, a lot of people sit there and go, why do they always use all these same referees and everything? And there's reasons behind it based upon they become comfortable. Refereeing is no different than fighting. I always look and say, you know, someone that, you know, has, you know, 10 fights under their belt, they're starting to learn. They're getting there. But it's, you know, the person that is active and always in the gym and always picking up fights, you know, the Jeremy Horns of the world who Joe knows well and everything, those are the people, man, they're dangerous because they get so much experience and they're so good all the way around at what they do. And it's repetitions. They have so many repetitions. They don't normally get nervous for the fights. Yeah, they'll get a little, you know, butterflies in the back, and that's normal. But it's the same for referees. I always try to explain to athletic commissions, because they'll sit there and they, you know, I get a lot of input into who they use at times and stuff for things in the past. And I would tell them, you know, they would say, we're going to use, you know, this person. And I go, that's not a good idea. And I would never do that. That could be somebody that I actually trained. And I wouldn't do it to take something away from them. I would do it to try to protect them, because you can put somebody in that position. Now they're putting them in this high profile fight where there's going to be a lot of eyes on it. The person knows that. And so when they step into the cage to, you know, get ready for these fighters to walk out, they have a heart rate of about 100 beats per minute while they're just standing there. And then the first fighter's walking out. Now the second fighter's walking out. And by the time, you know, you have Bruce Buffer or somebody announcing these fighters, their heart rate's at about 145 to 150 beats per minute. And they are going to absolutely make a mistake if something happens within the first couple minutes of the fight, because everything's going too fast for them. You know, the Herb Deans of the world, the Jason Herzogs, the Mark Goddards, they have so many repetitions that when they're standing there and whatever fight it is, you know, you got, you know, Sugar Sean against Merab, you know, that's a big fight at the Sphere. You know, Herb's heart rate is about 68 beats per minute. Okay. He's calm and relaxed, and he knows exactly what he's going to do. And that's what you want. And so the more repetitions you get, the better off you're going to be. So when I say the most nervous I ever was at the beginning of my career, but I will tell you, there was one time that, you know, it wasn't it was at UFC 129. They had actually offered me the main event, which was George St. Pierre against Jake Shields. And I had done Jake's last 4 fights. And I just told him, I said, hey man, I'm very thankful that you're offering me that. Give that fight to Herb Dean. I would love to do the Mark Hominick versus Jose Aldo. That to me is the better fight between the two competitors. And I'd really like to do that fight. And they go, you want the co-main? I said, yeah. Right. And they go, all right, you got the co-main. So I got that, and that was from a guy named Ken Hayashi who ran Ontario at the time. And so standing in that cage with 55,000 people, and Mark Hominick was coming out, and they had this Canadian flag and the giant jumbotrons and stuff. And they had this like snowflake, and it was this song that came out, Coming Home. And it actually P. Diddy, unfortunately.
No.
It was. But it was Skylar Gray, does the sing, I'm coming home. And it was Mark Hominick, who had been a professional fighter for how long? His first fight, official fight in Ontario, the actual province that he grew up in. It was his first fight. And I'm watching him walk out, and I got a chill. And I was like, damn, that doesn't happen to me very often. But cool. It was like really, I was just like, man, just every bit of that and how many people were there and stuff. I was like, this is cool.
Did you tell him that?
No.
Oh man, I would love to hear that, man. If you got to chill.
I've never told him that.
I'm sure he'd love that.
That's badass. Well, we got the big one this weekend. We got UFC 307. Alex Pereira is taking on Khalil Rountree. And so many people, all the internet experts are saying Alex Pereira is going to run through him. But you watch Khalil Rountree.
Absolutely not.
You watch Khalil Rountree. He's a southpaw, a very, very good kickboxer. He doesn't really swat at a lot of stuff. He doesn't swat at things. He doesn't over parry. And he's very explosive, a very good counterpuncher. I think it's going to be a phenomenal match. I haven't really picked who I think is going to win. Who you got, Big Jon?
Man, I mean, if you're going to sit there and say, who do you got? Obviously, you got to see the odds-on favorites is the champ in Pereira. But I say this, and it's like what you're talking about. First off, people are not giving Khalil Rountree enough credit for how good he is. Think of another glory champion that came into the UFC that they immediately put with Khalil Rountree, and that was Gohan Saki. And who put who to sleep?
Yes.
Khalil Rountree put him to sleep. Okay. And yeah, Saki may have been a little bit older, at the time and stuff, and may have not been at the peak of his athletic career, but man, he was still good. And Khalil put him to sleep. And the real problem is this, when I look at the fight, exactly what you said. Khalil Rountree is a southpaw. What does Alex Pereira live off of? A left hook.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be hard to land that left hook with the same consistency. It's the distance is different. It's the offside. It's a little bit different. Khalil's got a beautiful right hook.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that he has got power in, and he's fast. I honestly think that Khalil, people aren't giving him credit. He is faster than Alex. Now I think Alex possibly has more power, but Khalil has power. It's not like he doesn't have knockout power. So the power's on both sides. Maybe Alex's is better, but this is not going to. And the best part of it, I don't see Alex going for a takedown, even though he's got one. I think he's at 100% on his takedowns because he's got one. And I don't think Khalil's going to go for a takedown. So they're going to stand and make it, a small gloved kickboxing match, and someone's going to go to sleep. And so, will it be Khalil? Possibly. Will it be Alex? Possibly.
Yeah, and Khalil's on a good little streak too. And in his streak, he fought Dustin Jacoby. He fought Anthony Smith, guys that are similar to Alex Pereira. I mean, probably not quite as confident, obviously, and don't hit as hard, but similar. And the dude is sharp. Okay, next one. Let's move on to Ilia Topuria, Max Holloway.
Man, I'll tell you what. This is one that's got me. I don't know, and I'm not going to pat myself on the back, but I had picked Max against Justin.
Nice.
I thought that Max was a bad matchup for Justin, in the fact that and my whole thing going back is there's no one. If Max Holloway fights the way that he fought against Justin, but at the time I was saying how he fought against Calvin Kattar, I go, there's no one in the UFC that can at that weight that can stay with him. He is too good with his angles, too good with his footwork. He's able to get in without getting hit. He exits beautifully, and he makes you pay on exits. Mm-hmm. Justin is, I love him as a fighter. He's one of my favorite guys to watch because he brings it, but he's a straight linear fighter most of the time. And Max does well against those guys that kind of come forward straight ahead linear. And so I thought Max would, win that fight. Luckily, that, not luckily for Justin, but luckily, that opinion was right. But this one against Topuria, I've been high on Topuria since he came in. I watched Topuria at a show that I was at that I didn't ref him, but I watched him and I said, man, that kid's good. And you'll see these kids, and they're out there, there's guys out there, and I say it all the time, and people go, oh, you just, you're trying to put down the UFC. And it's like, why am I trying to put down the UFC? I'm not ever trying to put down the UFC. It's like if you look in, the 135-pound weight class, there's great fighters that are not in the UFC. In the 145, there's a guy sitting outside, that is living in Chechnya that, man, he's a monster, but he's not in the UFC. And I understand why he's not in the UFC. The UFC can only have so many Dagestanis or Chechens or, that don't speak English and stuff. It's hard to market them. You got to get that one special one. But I look at Topuria as he's good everywhere. And it's the difference between him and Max is in the stand-up. I think they're very similar. I think Max is longer. I think that Topuria is going to be able to use his footwork well against Max, but he's going to get hit. And it's how quickly does Topuria start looking for takedowns? Because I do think that on the ground, he's the better ground fighter. He's got more tools in the box than Max as far as that.
Last one before we move on, we got Robert Whittaker versus Khamzat Chimaev. And I'm pretty sure, is it 5 rounds? God, I wish I would have known. I think it is 5 rounds.
I believe that is a 5-round fight. They talked about it before. That'll be a co-main, but it's 5 rounds. That one is, I love Bobby Knuckles. I think Whittaker reminds me a lot of Mr. Joe Riggs there.
Joe Stevenson.
The Diesel.
Yeah.
You know, the Diesel there, you know, at a time, you know, Joe was a wrestler.
Yeah.
And then he became a goddamn stand-up monster for a while. And you know, he could hit. And that's who Whittaker is. He's still got the ground game and he can still use it. But he can't use his ground game against Chimaev. Chimaev is special. And, you know, and I was talking about this today. Someone brought it up, and they were talking about, you know, man, you know, I remember I went to the, you know, Kevin Holland when he had to fight Chimaev and all the weight classes switched and everything. I said, yeah, that was not a good fight for Holland. And they said, yeah, he goes, you know, Chimaev was just all over him. I said, if you go back and you watch it, Kevin Holland was doing everything right, trying to get him off of his back. And he was stuck on him like glue.
Yeah.
And you watch what Chimaev did to stay in great positions while Holland was Grambian and doing all these things to get out. And Chimaev just ate every position up. And you look and you go, that's not luck. That's skill. And the problem with Chimaev is he has shown a deficiency when it comes to cardio. And it's when someone is able to get past his first round. So I look at, you know, that fight with him and Whittaker's got to survive the first 2 rounds and then start coming on. Because, you know, Kamaru Usman, when he fought Chimaev, he got, you know, toasted in the first round. Second round was a little bit better. And the third round, he won that and he was coming on. So, you know, Chimaev has that, you know, if you're going to look for a blueprint, you got to push him past his comfort zone. You got to stay with him past the first round and then start pushing him in the second.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a huge fight. First time at 5 rounds. I'm curious if he's going to come out with a smarter pace or still just pedal to the metal right off the rip. Right, I guess we're going to find out. But Big Jon, you got a 70-acre farm in Tennessee now.
Yes, I do.
Damn.
And what's your favorite animals you have on your farm?
My favorite ones, honest to God, are the pigs. They're the easiest. They got the best personalities.
They're smart, right?
Oh yeah, they're smart, man. They are really smart.
And do you plan on making some bacon with them?
Oh, I already have.
Oh,
sir.
no.
Is it hard?
No, hold on. You got to understand. It's when you have pigs. You know, I take. It's a weird thing. A rancher basically kind of, you know, pushed me towards doing certain things. When I was younger, I had lived in a place where my neighbor actually. He was a marketer for Toyota, but he would buy pigs in Ohio, and we were living in California, and he would bring them for the kids in the 4-H club for the fairs, and the kids would raise them and then sell them off during the fair and make money, and it was a good experience for all of them. And that's when I started to kind of get, you know, an understanding for pigs. But, you know, you take a look at, like, I have cows, I have cattle, but if I have a bull and, you know, a female, you know, cow, she gets pregnant, I get 1 calf a year. Okay. And that's okay, you know, but, you know, be that a female or a male, depends on what I'm going to do with it. But then I go, and if I have a pig goes into heat 3 times a year and has up to about 15.
That horse.
So
Damn.
I have, instead of 1, I can get up to, like, we'll say, you know, that survive 38, 35. So I now have a whole lot more as far as product that I can give out to people and do things with. So I've learned how to try to be a farmer. I'm not good at it, but I'm a hard worker with it.
And when it's time to go, when you wake up and you know it's the time for a pig with a good personality, no, for real, is it hard and you just you gave it a good life and then now it's time?
Do you name him?
Dude, I have named I only have 1 male because you don't.
He's fucking them all.
I think he named him Josh Thompson.
Josh Thompson.
Male species on farms, there's only one because all the rest of them are a pain in the ass.
No shit.
Because you either gotta deball them, okay, castrate them, which is never fun to do, but you do it. So you have that, or you've got to figure out something to do with it because they're going to try to do something that the other one's doing. The other one's going to get mad, and they're just fighting. God. So you only have one. So my male pig is Josh the Pork Thompson.
Don't they have corkscrew dongs that are weirdly shaped? Yeah. Fucking nasty
they do.
bastards.
They got like this corkscrew.
Yes. Why?
They don't have to move their hips much. They're just like you, Joe.
They're just oh, fuck it. Yeah. You've done it now.
Well, Joe had a penile fracture back in the day, John, and it didn't heal right.
Oh, man.
It was a bad night, John. It wasn't good. But I've prevailed from there.
She must have been something.
Yeah, well, it was myself.
He's trying to be a hero.
I was. I came out of the way and caught it between the tailbone, the tailbone and the whatever the fuck it is, but snapped him right in half. Oh, it's horrible.
Oh, it was bad. That's a painful maneuver.
Never again.
It was bad. Yeah, that's what we call bad.
Yeah.
So do you have quite a bit of help on your farm?
I have my father-in-law lives on the farm. He's zero help. Except
just a drunk.
No, he's not a drunk. He's a very nice. He's one of those guys that likes to meet everybody.
Oh.
But he feeds the donkeys. He likes to go and feed the donkeys. He'll do that. So he takes care of the donkeys as far as feeding them carrots. I have to feed them the rest of the stuff, comb them down, do all the other things. But he feeds them the carrots. My daughter and my daughter-in-law live on the land, and they're phenomenal workers. They take care of everything. They take care of all the chickens, which the chickens give us a ton of eggs and everything. So I have goats. My daughter-in-law is always milking the goats. Thank God that I don't have to. Wow. Even though it is an automatic machine, it's just a pain in the ass.
A machine? You you just hook them up to the nips? Is that what you do?
Yep.
Really?
Yep. Yeah, you got to sterilize the nips every time, and
you got to wipe
sure
it down.
Clean that thing.
Nice.
Yeah, boom, boom, pop those bad boys on, and just watch it go. And dude, and it's funny because the goats love it because
really?
they get sore.
Yeah,
they get sore, and they get food. You stand up in the stand, you get food. They're all fighting to get up there.
So you're drinking raw goat milk and raw milk and fresh farm eggs every day.
Yep.
Damn, that's badass. So routine, you usually wake up really early to go check on the animals. How early you wake up?
No, it's when the sun comes up, basically. It just depends on the time of year or where you're at. Right now the sun's coming up where I'm at, probably 7:15. So I'm up at 7:15 or so.
And I've
going.
I've introduced Joe to some of the THC cannabis plant, and he's been really enjoying that a little bit too much.
Yeah, I never did that in my whole life. I got looked down on people, but now I've just destroyed myself.
Oh my God!
So caffeine and marijuana are probably my two favorite drugs. Are you dealing with any drugs these days?
No, man. It's funny because being a police officer, I never did anything, and then when I retired and stuff, and it was like, my wife actually has lupus, and marijuana helps her lupus. Yeah. I actually was on the cover of Cannabis magazine.
Hey, go on.
Right? Yeah. And, because I personally think that, marijuana's got a bad rap as far as for all those years in the past. It's no different than anything else. It can be abused, but it's a great, for inflation inflammation and things like, I was gonna say inflation for inflammation and things like that. I think it helps athletes in recovery. I think it does a lot of things. I will tell you, I've taken it twice, I want to say, because I did a podcast for someone, and they gave me these. They said, these are Pop Rocks, right? And I said, these are part of our sponsors and stuff. And they said, try them, right? And so I'm like, I didn't think anything of it. I take them, and after a while they said, are you feeling anything? I go,
shit.
Why? Right? And they go, well, the Pop Rocks, that's got THC in it. I go, you got to be shitting me. Right? And they go, you never done marijuana? I said, no, that's, but it didn't do anything to me. I didn't feel anything, nothing. So my daughter, who believes in marijuana, she's a big believer in what is done with it. She said, someday I want to try. So I have, friends, Joey Diaz, who I love, man. We're always, talking, and he's the guy that he does edibles. and he's always talking about, and Joe Rogan will even talk about Joey and the Death Stars. And, everyone, if you're going to do a Death Star, you just take a blade. Don't eat the whole star. Well, Joey's eating like 4 stars. Boom, he's popping them in his mouth.
Jeez.
Right? So my daughter comes up with this. I said, you want to give me Death Stars? And she goes, look, 20 milligrams, I think would be, I think since you're big, maybe 40 milligrams at the most.
Shit.
Right. So she puts the 20 down there. I said, all right, I'll do it. I'm at home. It doesn't matter. Boom. And then I was like, well, I'm not going to be a candy ass. And I did boom, the second one. Right. And I am just a candy. I'm good when it comes to alcohol. I'm not good when it comes to marijuana. So, cause all of a sudden, I'm talking to her and all of a sudden I realize I didn't get that word. I didn't get that word either. And then all of a sudden it's like, where'd she go? I don't see her, right? So she comes back into the view. And I had my wife had talked about how time seems to slow down and things, and I didn't think anything of it. And so now I'm like, holy shit, I am fucked up. Right? And she, my wife goes my daughter looks, she goes, are you okay? I said, no. and I'm looking at this couch that is right there. And I said, I'm going to try to walk over to that couch. And when I sit down, do not let me get up until I am normal.
Oh God,
dude, it seemed like forever. And so I've never done it again since. I was like, nope, that is not for me. I will take whiskey.
Woke up in a bed full of Twinkies. Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, if you dose it right, you might like it. I'm like, for me, maybe probably 2 milligrams, 3 milligrams.
That's a lot, John.
5 milligrams, but 40.
Yeah.
Dude.
That's like a full bottle of whiskey to the dome.
Oh yeah. My daughter said, she goes, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Because you can drink a lot, I thought maybe. She goes, I should have done like 15. I go, God. 15? 15? You're a little off. That's, but,
40, 15.
So do you do much caffeine?
I do. Come on, dude. Look, I'm a horrible.
Hey.
I am sponsored by that fantastic company, but I drink them so much.
Twice a day,
coffee.
or 3 times a day?
Oh, 6 times a day.
Nice.
Damn, getting charged up.
Oh yeah.
In your room, just saying, let's get it on.
Oh yeah.
No, I'm outside doing it.
John, if I was
Honestly,
you, I'd go to the trees. You ready? You ready? All the time. I would.
Yeah, you should make some good Instagram reels.
Yeah, just 2 homeless guys. You ready? You ready? You go. Yeah, that's great.
Hell yeah.
I just do it with the bulls.
Yeah.
John, the reffing is really it's. I reffed one time. I'm gonna embarrass myself telling you this, but I was really nervous because I don't want to make a mistake, which I did. I was drunk. I started drinking, sitting down there. But I don't know if you ever heard of a guy, Ray Elby. He suffered a penile.
Oh, I know Ray.
Okay, he's also a member of the penile fracture crew. So so I'm watching. He's getting the shit beat out of him. Like, someone stop this fight. It's me. So I kind of run over. I'm in the other. It was in a ring. They're in the far corner. I run, miss, fly to the ropes, and was dragged out of there in shame. It was horrible. Never to ref again. Never to do it again.
What's funny is everyone has this idea of what it's going to be like, and it's not anything like. You can have a fight that I tell people all the time. Look, anyone can fight an easy fight, because you don't do anything really. You're just sitting there making sure that everything's being followed, and you're just standing, walking around, putting yourself in the right position. But anyone can do it. It's the hard fights, and there are those that are going to come that you have to make those decisions and know what to do. Oh, it can become your worst nightmare.
Can you remember a really hard fight off the top of your head, the hardest one you had to do?
Oh, when I talk about, hard fights as far as, a lot of, things happening, it's always funny stuff that kind of, when I look back at it, you look at people doing stupid things and you go, what are you doing? I had one of the ones that I thought it was funny at the time it was in Bellator. It was at the Pechanga Casino in California, and they had 2 guys, heavyweights. I knew both of them, and they're fighting, and one is able. He's a better wrestler. He's able to take the other guy down and just maul him and stay in basically a hip ride position, and he's just jackhammering a left hand consistently every now and then switch up. Guy would try to get up, mat return, rinse, wash, repeat. It gets to the 3rd round, he gets taken down again. And finally he's like, because the guy's doing the hip ride, he looks back, I can see him, right? And he goes, 2 shots, boom, boom, right to his nose.
Oh,
right. And the other guy falls off. The guy who falls off is Josh Chappelle. He falls off of him, right? And I come in, stop, right? Time, get up, right? And as he's getting, the one guy's getting up, I go, what do you think you're doing? Right? He goes, I didn't mean that, right? And I go, oh yeah, my kids lie to me every day too. Okay, it's like you meant it, but in that kind of situation with that's the kind that normally I could disqualify it, but I'll go to the fighter and I'll say, hey, you tell me. Do you want to get back at him? You want a chance to punch him in the face legally? And they'll always go, yep. And so, I go and I took 2 points from him for the foul because it's intentional.
2 shots.
It caused damage. Mm-hmm. And so it's automatic. I have to take the 2 points and I let him go back to the fight. And, the fight ended up in the same position, but you'll have those they're kind of funny. Then you'll have the ones that you're truly concerned. You're concerned because you don't want to be part of what I call the club. And there's a club out there, and that club is, referees that have had fighters die based upon the fights that they've had in the ring, cage, depending upon, what sport, boxing or MMA. And so there are certain situations, if you're smart and you've done your job and you know exactly what you're looking at, you'll start to see it. I had that with Rory McDonald with Robbie Lawler. Oh. And a lot of people look at that fight. They love the fight. It was an incredible fight. But if you look at it, Rory is dying during parts of that fight based upon he's aspirating blood, which means he's starting to have the blood stick into his lungs. He's not swallowing it. He's breathing it in, and now it's taking his lungs' ability to dissipate the oxygen throughout his body is now being stopped. And you're looking and you're going, okay, how far am I going to allow this to go? Because he would come out every round just like they normally do, and he would do well based upon he now has oxygen. He's had that minute rest. Now that he gets a little tired, now he's starting to suck air because he can't breathe through his nose, and he's starting to breathe through his mouth, and now he's starting to fall off the cliff. But now it gets to the end of the round. All right, he's made it. Let's try to see if we can go to the next one. But those are the ones to me that are scary. And they're scary because no one truly knows what's going on except for you. You got your ringside physician that you're talking to saying, hey, this is what I'm seeing. This is what I want you to watch. And so you want to give, that's a world title fight is the way you're looking at it. And you got to give Rory everything that you can allow him to do to win that title. This is a moment that it's not just given to him. He has earned it. But I don't want him to earn it to the point of now I let him swim into such deep water that he drowns.
Shit.
And so it's one of those, that's one of those fights that I look at. It was a phenomenal fight, but I had the most concern over that fight was one of the ones that really had me scared.
That was a brutal fight.
Yeah,
brutal
that's
fight.
crazy.
Brutal.
Well, Big Jon, thank you so much for what's up, Nick? Sorry.
Hey, one more question for you, Jon.
Yeah.
Obviously, you've made a ton of arrests in your career, but one notorious one was actually on the Bully Beatdown set. It was kind of a makeshift arrest. I'm wondering if you remember that. It had to do with one of the guests here on the show.
I'll tell you. Okay, Jon, I hope you remember this. Okay, Bully Beatdown. They're quiet in the crowd. Like, quiet on the set, everybody's quiet. And my drunk father was a drunk in the crowd. He's, fuck him up. Like, everybody's quiet. And he does it 3 times. I knew it was my dad. I'm like, please, God, no. And then they drag him somewhere, and you led him to this thing where they corralled him with fucking pallets. And he's so drunk, he was just meandering around like a horse. I'm like, Dad, what are you doing? He goes, oh, Jon just told me to come back here. I'm like, oh, okay. So, do you remember that? Do you remember that?
I do remember
that. my dad loves Jon, like loves him.
Dude.
Yeah.
That was, that show was so freaking hysterical.
That was.
Because it was, when they first asked me to come talk about doing it, there's a whole background behind that thing. And Terry Treblecock, who runs King of the Cage, he had sold King of the Cage with the Elite XC, and then Elite XC ends up dying. He ends up getting, King of the Cage back, and he gets the rights to this Bully Beatdown.
No shit.
That then goes, yeah, well, and so they, the guys who are the producers of it, come and it's Mark Burnett is one of them. He's the executive producer. So I sit down at a table with him, and he's sitting there, and well, one of the things we don't want anyone to get hurt. And I go, well, then you better get some better fighters. And I meant that when I said, look, you have got a bunch of C level, D level fighters fighting in this. I go, they're going to have to fight fairly hard so they don't look bad. It's not that, you know, they can't beat the bully, but they're going to have to go after him, and they're not going to take it easy. I said, you get a good fighter, they can play with them and they can do what you're asking. Well, Terry was the one that was bringing all the fighters. He was bringing all of the guys from King of the Cage.
His guys.
I don't blame him.
Like Thomas.
Yeah, I don't blame him. And so that was, you know, they said, well, can you get us those fighters? And I go, yeah, I can get you. I said, I can't get you people from the UFC. I said, they have a contract that's really not going to, you know, play out to where they're able to do it. I go, but I can get you good, you know. So I got him Tyrone Woodley and Dan Cormier and Eddie Alvarez and Andre Arlovsky. And, you know, I started bringing pretty good fight. And that show turned to be so much fun just to watch the idiots. Cause I always said there was 3 different types of bullies. There was ones that were actually, they're dipshits and they're bullies. And, you know, they did their thing. There was ones that these guys would be someone who was training and fighting with the guy that was the poor victim. And so they would have this deal between them that, hey, you know, I'll say that, you know, you're you know, bullying me and you know how to fight. So then we'll split the money. I think there was that kind too. And then the third kind was, there's just dummies that'll sit there and say, I just want to be on TV. So I'll say I'm a bully and I'll just get the shit beat out of me. But, you know, but there was some funny moments in that thing.
There was a ton, man. There was a ton. Do you I felt bad for Thomas Denny not going out there and not getting a tap, not being able to finish him. And the guy, I mean, the guy was a strong guy, you know, really stalling, but shit, man, it would be hard to leave like that.
Yeah, that was and that guy's brother, if you know, that guy's brother was actually in K1.
No shit.
He was a good kickboxer. So, you know, that guy, that all happened before I came in. So it was one of those ones. Well, I don't know if it happened before I came in, but it was. Some of them were hysterical.
Hell yeah!
Because there was guys that I knew of. You know, one guy came in and I said, hey. I said, who do you guys have fighting, you know, here? And they said, oh, we've got Rick Laguerre fighting. I said, you can't do that. I go, this guy trains with Marco Huas. I know who he is. I said, here, let's give him Eddie Alvarez. Right?
Shit.
So this guy comes on the show. He you know, as soon as, you know, because the bullies never knew who they were going to fight. Mm-hmm. They kept them at different hotels and they kept it a secret till the fighter walked out. Like when you walked out, that's the first time that bully knows who they're going to actually. You can tell. Oh, it's hysterical.
Yeah.
And so this guy looks and he's like, son of a bitch. When Eddie walks out, he goes, son of a bitch. Right? And so he actually, there was a lockers in the back, if you remember, that they would have the bully sign, and he signed, he goes, I come here to win $10,000 and you give me Eddie fucking Alvarez. Thanks a lot.
That's good.
That's awesome. Well, Big Jon, thank you so much. The sport would not be fucking anywhere where it's at without you, and not many people know it. So give Big Jon MCCARTHY a follow on Instagram, and then check out his podcast with Josh Thompson, Weighing In, on YouTube. Thank you so much, Jon. That was a phenomenal show. Thanks a lot.
It's my pleasure, Tim. Thanks for having me. And Joe, it's good seeing you, brother.
Good seeing you, buddy.
Hell yeah. We'll talk to you soon, Jon. Thank you, bro.
Take it easy, man.